What are your funniest D&D stories? My character died early on and RDM let me possess my dog to keep playing. I proceeded to play as a charismatic, albeit haunted, German Shepherd with a katana crudely duct taped to it for the rest of the campaign. My player played a Scion, who had a spell which made his eyes light up like car's headlights. He walked around a dark dungeon along with his group, killing everything in sight. While in the area, where he knew there would be a boss nearby, he silently walked up to a door and looked through its keyhole while his eyes were still on. The monster boss saw the light coming through the keyhole and broke down the door, which hit the Scion's head and knocked him out. Story: a friend told me he had never played before and was invited by one of our mutual friends to a D&D night. Of course, being a brand new character, he didn't really get to do a lot of fighting. They mostly just had him carry stuff. One of the things they gave him was a teleportation stone. The way it worked is that they would set an anchor point in a village or home base, and then the stone could be used to open a portal to that spot for quick escapes. He decided to see what would happen if he threw it into the ocean. Ended up displacing the whole ocean and flooded the world. Game over. I had a friend who consistently used to play a priest. He'd find an elephant or a camel, something large, to use as a mount, ride it to death, cut the meat away for rations, and animate the carcass. As soon as he could afford to, he'd commission plateboarding for the skeletal animal, pad the interior of the ribcage with mattresses, and ride from inside it. Basically make himself the D&D equivalent of a tank/APC. Every damn time. This might be long, I apologize. Spoilers for Temple of Elemental Evil. So our group had been playing this module for quite a while, and a friend of mine joined the party. She was new to D&D, so she kept quiet during most of this, assuming we were experienced players and knew what we were doing. We stumbled across a hidden room in this evil temple that felt pure and holy. Inside we found another secret door, leading to a dark room that felt overwhelmingly evil. Inside was a coffin with a vampire inside, a stake through his heart. For some reason we thought that, if we removed the stake he would spring to life and attack us. So we prepared all of our spells and weapons, removed the stake and nothing. Since he didn't attack us, we decided to cut off his head, put it in a sack and burn his heart on a flaming sword along with his body. My friend thought an easier solution would be to move the vampire next door into the holy room, but didn't say anything, since she thought we would know what's best. We returned to the nearby village to tell the church what we had done and to show off the vampire's head. Unfortunately, the head we presented was that of the prince and high paladin of the realm. The evil room in the temple had an illusion spell on the prince, and had we just moved him into the other room the spell would be broken and we could see his true form. Moral of the story: if you are new to D&D, never assume the players are smart and know what's best. Rolled a tanky human fighter once who was really scrappy and got into fights he couldn't win a lot. To make things less painful for the party's cleric, the DM eventually gave my character a 1x/day boon that made him completely invulnerable to all non-magical damage for 10 minutes. Later on in the campaign, some shenanigans led to the group attempting, and mostly succeeding in hijacking an airship, think hybrid zeppelin/gunship. Near the end of the fight I failed a dex save and went overboard. Was surrounded by maybe 15 really pissed off dudes and the group's cleric yelled down at me, "Do the thing," before launching a broadside volley at the spot where I was standing from the airship's gun deck. One round later I was standing unscathed in the middle of a smoking crater with pulverized chunks of half-cooked bandit all around me. I was climbing a cliff face that was roughly 250 feet up, while a dragon landed in front of the rest of the party right in front of the ladder that was used to get up the cliff. So I set down the item we were getting from said dragon's horde, pulled out 2 javelins, and jumped from the top of the cliff. The dragon was almost dead, so all I had to do was land on it. Well, as I was falling the dragon decided that it was going to take off. It raised its head and opened its wings just as I was landing on it, and I killed the dragon. The only bad thing about this is the fact that it was 250 feet of freefall. I killed the dragon on impact and hit its skull so hard that it immediately killed me. My party made it out of the caves with my body, but they couldn't revive me. The only person besides myself that could revive me rolled a natural 1 3 times in a row and I couldn't roll anything higher than a 5, so in the end I died. But I also killed a dragon as my last act. The things the barbarian gets the paladin to do. I was deeming the party. My wife was playing a paladin with a hippogriff for her mount, and our friend was a barbarian. The party had accidentally stirred up the undead around an orc village. They'd been forced to retreat into a box canyon, and the entrance to the canyon was completely blocked by hundreds of skeletons. Unfortunately, nobody had brought any blunt weapons, so all their attacks were suffering damage reduction, and it was taking forever for them to do any real damage to the skeletons. The barbarian had a quick chat with the paladin. His suggestion was that she should get on her hippogriff, fly up to about 100 feet, then jump off, curl into a ball, and drop into the skeletons to do bludgeoning damage to them. After all, he reasons, falling damage from that altitude would only be 10d6, but she'd cause 10d6 damage to any skeletons she hit. She could hit multiple skeletons, and it'd probably kill a bunch of them. And then she did it. She actually did it. Flew up to 100 feet, shouted cowbunga, jumped off, curled into a ball, and went rolling through the skeletons like a cannonball. Now, whenever they're facing difficult odds, the barbarian's first suggestion is, hey, paladin, remember when you went bowling for skeletons? We had this long running campaign and the DM tries to not affect storylines too much. He is amazing at description, but he likes to have the dice rolls and stats completely steer his creativity, as do most of us. We entered a situation he was obviously very excited about. It was a situation he created which was designed to get us overpowered by an army and each getting bags put over our heads / knocked out with a plan of waking up somewhere else. Well, our group made like 7 amazing dice rolls one after another, and we somehow critically wounded the main antagonist and escaped. He admitted to us later he had to rewrite the campaign to introduce another antagonist who surprised us later. Good stuff. Evil campaign. The players are mostly drow, investigating mysteries across the Underdark. One is an evil cleric. He realizes that he can command undead the first time the party encounters a group of skeletons very early in the game. He decides that it's really cool to have a skeleton army, and the rest of the party agrees. Anytime they find a weapon or armor the party doesn't want, they give it to one of the skeletons. Our cleric decides to name the captain of his skeleton army. He calls him Sasha. Several sessions later the party kicks in the door of a wizard's tower. They make it to the top of the tower and the wizard's sanctum. The rogue decides to try to sneak into the sanctum and scope out the room. He opens the door and is unobserved. The rogue takes the opportunity to use his knockout poison to try and take out the wizard. He doesn't think it'll work, but it's worth a shot. It works. The wizard falls unconscious without a fight. The party then has to figure out what to do. The wizard won't stay unconscious for long, so they throw him out the window of the top floor of his own tower, onto the waiting spears of the cleric's skeleton army, who proceeds to savage the unconscious wizard, culminating in Sasha holding the dead wizard's head aloft as a trophy. In over a decade of playing D&D, nothing has come close to beating this tale. It's not much of a story, but here goes. Last session we broke into the Red Brand's Idiot and came across a group playing dice. We were dressed like Red Brand, so rather than attack us, they just questioned what we were doing there. I told them we just got off duty and wanted to pass some time. Then one guy at the table said, "You don't look familiar. Why haven't I seen you before?" So I said we normally work a different shift, but we got moved around because Greg went and broke his ankle. We are here to fill in. I just barely failed my deception check, so the DM had them grow suspicious of us and start reaching for their swords. The man replied, "I don't know a Greg either." At this moment I knew I had to think fast or we'd be in for a fight, so I blurted out the first thing that came to mind. Okay, I'm gonna level with you guys. We aren't here to cover for Greg. We're actually from HR and we've come to investigate rumors of inappropriate behavior in this workplace." Sadly I rolled low again, and after a few confused seconds the Red Brand screamed out, "Wait a minute, we don't have an HR department." And all it didn't do much, but it did get the table laughing pretty hard. Edit. Also our group name is now the HR department, so that's cool. We were playing the early part of a campaign and our party enters a temple where a bunch of people are sitting around on their knees, not paying attention to us and chanting. The DM describes the room and says there is a big circle drawn on the floor, and then says, "What do you guys do?" I asked him what the circle, if made of, and he says, "Ash or something similar." I say those magic words. I break the circle with my foot. Complete silence for about 15 seconds, and then the DM begins grabbing books and flipping pages. Ends the night early, and says when we get together next time the whole campaign will be going in an entirely new direction. Yep. I broke the DM. Still hear that line "I break the circle with my foot" from time to time, and makes me chuckle every time. One thing it taught me as a DM is you can never plan for every eventuality. We had just rolled up some random characters for a one-off adventure, and our characters met for the first time at a tavern. We hadn't met yet, so each person looked around the tavern and decided on what to do to build my character. I decided to head towards a group of dwarves, since everyone else elected to join the definitely not Russians in a drinking contest. The dwarves told me they were on their way to liberate their ancestral home from rat people who had forced them out. As my character ended up being a halfling with godlike charisma and agility, I regaled to them the story of the Hobbit. Critical success. They got so into it, they invited me on an adventure that would have been straight out of Tolkien. Meanwhile, the rest of the party failed their drinking tests and blacked out after a few rounds.